Gone Fishing with Bob and TJ is brought to you by Ranger Boats, still building legends one at a time. Daiwa Rods and Reels, committed to total quality. Humminbird Wide, fish wide open. And Raider Fiberglass Truck Tops, today's value leader.
Hi, I'm TJ Schwenke.
And I'm Bob Kirkpatrick. Today we're in southeastern British Columbia at Duck Lake near the town of Creston.
Now today we're going to be fishing with float tubes, but we're going to be doing something a little different. We're going after largemouth bass.
TJ, this is a waterfowl sanctuary, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a federal bird sanctuary and no power boats are allowed on here, so you pretty often come out in a canoe or a rowboat or like we're in. These float tubes are ideal for this lake.
Oh, they're great. Now, as long as the wind doesn't get up, we're okay. We're half a mile or more from where we started. This lake isn't very deep either, is it?
No, it's not. It's probably only 6 or 8 feet maximum. And there's a lot of cover and a lot of weed growth, and that's kind of what the bass really key in on.
Well, I noticed there's certain areas where there's different weeds growing. Like we're in an area now where there's lots of tall weeds, whereas before it was kind of like a mossy bottom.
And the bass look for these tall weeds and use them for shelter. I don't think a lot of people in the east would like to hear it, but I'd almost rate the bass fishing better in British Columbia than anywhere else in Canada. It's just not that it's a very utilized fishery. I wouldn't doubt that there has been Canadian record bass caught in British Columbia and either taken home or released, and no one really knew what they had and took it in and properly registered it. If you haven't tried fishing in British Columbia for bass, it's a really overlooked fishery, and you know there's a ton of lakes you can go to. Feels a little better. I don't know, you might have himself wrapped down the weeds a little bit. I think what the bass do here is they're really, it's good bass, there's a really thick layer of weeds down here, and they hide in there. And so what you want to do is get your offering running just above it, but boy, this one keeps wrapping me up. You gotta use, there we are.
You got 2 in a row since you switched, TJ. Oh, that looks like a good one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try something a little different too. I know you've got that white crankbait on there, and that's a beautiful bass.
You bet it is. I'm using fairly heavy gear here, like this is 10-pound test Berkeley XT, and you know, we got these stiff Daiwa bait casting outfits here, and boy, I'll tell you, he got down in that milfoil, and it was hard to get him out of there. Like, I really had to reef. They really used that cover to their advantage. Well, I'm going to get him back here.
I'm going to try something a little bit different now. You know, obviously the rattles and the action of your bait is attracting them. I'm going to try a topwater here, a buzz bait. This will just clip across the top of the water, make a lot of noise. Maybe it'll call them out of those deep weeds.
I'm just going to get this one back, Bob. Strength, there it goes.
It's a nice fish.
Was it ever?
Oh, there's one, TJ.
I'm going to send a cast in right behind it.
This isn't a very big one.
Bass are really competitive, and quite often when one bites a hook, the others will actually even come and try and take it out of its mouth. So if you throw in behind it, quite often you'll pick up another bass right away.
Well, switching to these crankbaits sure seem to make a difference. I don't know why we couldn't catch any on spinnerbaits. It looks like a good day for that, but it just seems like the crankbaits are diving down a little deeper, and those fish are down deep in the weeds. What a nice little bass. Whoa!
They're sure active in here. It's not uncommon for them to come out of the water like 5 or 6 times when you're hooked into them. The problem with these cranks is, you know, we're hooking a lot of weeds with them, but it just seems to be the way, unless you're skimming right over top of those weeds on the bottom, you're not catching any fish. And I don't know whether those spinnerbaits were too aggressive or they were running too shallow. I don't know. They just weren't working.
Well, I think they were running too close to the surface, but most of the hits I've got since I changed to this crankbait, and I had to go through quite a few different ones to find one that didn't dive in too deep, but most of the hits are coming within the first 2 or 3 cranks of the handle. As soon as you cast out there, as soon as they start to dive down, the fish are coming up and smacking them. Who would believe there's bass fishing like this in British Columbia, TJ?
Well, isn't that the truth? I think, it really surprises a lot of people when you tell them that. But, there's a lot of other species in southern British Columbia here. Like, it's really diverse. Whoa, he's got me wrapped right up.
Well, I've noticed we've had some different species follow these baits up now. We saw some pumpkin seeds.
A lot of pumpkin seeds in here.
And lots of perch.
And some really nice perch. This whole southern interior of British Columbia's got some really nice fish. Like last year we were out here and did a couple shows and caught some huge sturgeon.
And we weren't very far from here either.
No. And, there's a lot of walleye down here, and it seems everyone's concentrating so much on the big trout species down here and kind of overlook a lot of these warm water species.
Well, these are great, and most of them are pretty easily accessible from the roads, and not a lot of pressure.
The thing
wow, that's another nice fish.
Yeah. The thing about this, too, you don't need big fancy equipment to do this. Whoa, there's a hefty bass there. That's a great fish. I try to get out here, a couple times a year just to enjoy this bass fishing. It's really something. Look out of him. There's a nice 3.5 pound bass there. That's a good bass wherever you go. Get him back in the water.
Oh, we're really into the weeds here, TJ. There should be lots more of them.
No kidding. It's hard to believe it was snowing yesterday where we come from, isn't it?
Yeah, we ran into a blizzard on the way out here. Quite a change.
The thing about southern BC, it's such a beautiful place to come to, especially in the springtime. We were in Alberta yesterday, and there was quite a snowstorm actually happening, which isn't that uncommon for the end of May in Alberta. I mean, the Rocky Mountains are a big influence on it, but it's a real nice place to come. Oh, there's one, we lost him.
Well, once I get out here, it's pretty easy to see why this is such a popular retirement spot, too. The weather is good most of the time. Scenery is so beautiful.
There's such a diversity here. I mean, we're down in a pretty mild bass lake, and you head up to the top of these mountains around us, and you're in snow-capped peaks. So there's a really diverse environment here. It's pretty incredible. I don't think you find that anywhere else.
Well, it's so nice now, too. All the fruit trees are in bloom. It looks terrific.
There's a better one here. Maybe not. Wow! Right out of the water.
The crankbaits with the rattles sure seem to be the ticket anyway.
Yeah. When I'm doing seminars, I have a lot of people ask me, about these baits with the rattles in them. And I really believe they work, and I use them quite a lot. The fish have what's called a lateral line that runs down the side of them, and on a bass, you can actually see it right here. It's a little line that's full of holes, and inside those holes, just let me get that bass back, is tiny hairs. And the whole purpose of that lateral line is to pick up vibration underwater. And any bait going through the water sends out vibrations, but these rattles send out an extra vibration, plus they also send out an extra sound. Now, maybe this really clear water, it's maybe not quite as critical, but when you get in stained waters, it's really critical to send out a lot of noise.
Not only do they just pick up the vibration from the lateral line, but they can hear as well.
Yeah.
They have an inner ear, and so they've got a combination of the same senses that we have, and some of them, depending on the type of water they're in, kind of dictates on which ones they rely on at certain times.
And I think the more stained the waters or the faster the current or something like that, they definitely start to rely on their lateral line a lot more, because anytime their sight is diminished, they have to rely on other senses. But I don't know, I think with bass, they do work really well, and I think it's something they've become accustomed to, helping them, locate their prey.
Well, and you find bass, especially largemouth bass, in so many different types of water. They're stocked in dingy little farm ponds that are real muddy and weed-choked areas, and the only thing they can't really tolerate is a whole bunch of cold water. They can handle clear water, dirty water, so just about any situation, and they can adapt to any of those areas.
Get another one here. Well, that one sure went down in those weeds. It's amazing how they get in there. I saw my crankbait right between my feet when this one decided to hit. It was kind of amazing.
Well, that's one of the advantages of fishing out of these float tubes. Now, these are trout traps, and being so low profile on the water, like bass can see above the water as well, so being right close and low to the water like that, you've got quite an advantage, especially in clear water like this. But these float tubes are great. I mean, you can pack them in anywhere. We've got shoulder straps for these, and if you have to walk in off the road, they're great. They don't weigh very much. You can either blow them up at any service station or get a little foot pump and blow them up wherever you want to if you're flying into a place or packing in. And they've got all kinds of storage space on them. They're just great, and it doesn't require a lot of expense or effort to use them. We've got neoprene waders on that will keep us warm and dry, and flippers. And I've just got plain dive flippers on, and maybe they're a little bit big for this. They take quite a bit of energy to move me around, but TJ's got flippers that were designed for float tubing, and they just hook over your neoprene waders and away you go. So they're great, and sure gives you access to a lot of different areas that you couldn't get a boat into.
And it's just a real fun way to fish. It's so relaxing sitting out here just bobbing around in the water, and like you say, it gives you access to so many areas you couldn't fish, and this is a prime example on this lake because you can't run any powered boats out here, and what better way is there?
That's good exercise too, and it's really relaxing though, and that's what makes it a lot of fun. Oh, there's one, TJ.
All right. It's kind of slowed down here a little bit.
Yeah, it did. Well, this is a decent one.
Oh yeah.
Fishing really slowed down here. We were catching fish on crankbaits, and then it just quit. So we decided the best way is to probably slow down our presentation, and I'm using a rubber worm. I don't know where it went. He got it. I just Texas rigged a Berkeley sandworm. It's quite about an 8-inch worm on there, and obviously it worked. Boy, he hooked himself good. That's just the weight and the hook left. I'll have to hook up another one, but the whole idea is when the fishing slows down, you got to slow down your presentation. And what I'm doing with this worm, I'm just casting it out there, and there's a little weight on the front of it, carries it down. And these bass are hiding in the weeds. Like we can see the worm go down into the weeds, and you just twitch it back up, and the bass are in the shade down there. So work this over top of them, it'll entice them to come out of the weeds and hit those worms. But it's a real slow presentation. Just twitch it back, and when they hit, they still hit pretty hard. Not a bad bass. I think I'll let him go. There he goes. You can see him just swim down in the weeds and right underneath this cover, and he's gone.
That's the other thing about plastics. If you find you're getting a lot of hits on the hard-bodied baits like spinner baits and crankbaits, but they're not holding on to it, think about a bass. They can inhale and exhale a bait just in a split second. But the thing about the soft plastic baits, like the plastic worms, they'll actually hang on to them a little bit longer. So if you're finding you're getting a lot of bites but not hooking fish, that's another good time to go to the plastic baits as well. I think maybe the one thing we're doing a little differently that's helping us catch some fish is we're not actually retrieving just in a straight line.
Oh, when you vary your retrieve here, the different action seems to trigger the fish to strike, and also changes the vibration. Like with these spinner baits, every time you speed up, the blade spins a little faster and sends off a different vibration, and you slow it down, let it fall into the weeds. And that works the same with crankbaits or whether we're using the Texas rig worm. Any of the techniques we're using, I think when you vary your retrieve, it'll give you more strikes.
No doubt. The neat thing about these spinner baits is when you let them fall, that blade still keeps spinning, and it actually helicopters down. And you got one?
No, it's just
that's a lot of times.
Weed.
When you get the bites is when that blade's helicoptering down, because these are running, fairly shallow, maybe a foot or two below the surface. And when you let them helicopter down to 6 or 7 feet, those bass are just laying down the weeds and just come up and grab it as an easy meal. And like you say, that change in vibration, I think, really triggers them as well.
Well, like I felt that tap there and set the hook, and it was a weed, but it's a good idea to set the hook anytime you feel anything. By the time you figure out if it was a weed or a bass, it's too late if it was a fish, because you got to drive that hook home pretty hard.
Wow, that fish has sure been acrobatic.
Well, you come out of the water. This is definitely the biggest fish I've had on.
Oh, no kidding, that's a nice one. Now, fish have 5 senses when they feed. Sight, hearing, and vibration they always employ. But when they get a little more negative, which I think they are now, they also bring in the senses of taste and smell.
He's digging down in those weeds, TJ.
Whew. Now, that bait you're using's actually got smell right in it, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is a Berkeley power bait. And when the fish get negative, they actually come up and bump the bait, and they can taste and smell it. And with the soft plastic like this, they'll hold on a lot longer than on a hard bait.
That's a nice bass.
It's a beautiful bass.
Look at the big old mouth on those, though. I mean, it's incredible.
They're huge.
They can actually take a bait fish in up to half their length, believe it or not. I mean, they just open that big mouth up. And
well, like the bait I'm using is 8 inches long. You think, gee, that's pretty big for a lot of the small bass we're catching, but they seem to always hit it at the head end, and the size of the bait doesn't seem to matter. I guess bigger the better in a situation like this.
Well, I mean, it makes a lot more sense for them to eat a big meal. They only have to inhale it once to get full calories rather than taking in a bunch of little meals. Well, Berkeley power baits definitely work good. Yeah, no kidding. Get him back.
The lures that we had the most success with today were spinner baits like this Northland Reed Runner with the chartreuse and white skirt on it. And the crankbaits that we used were small crankbaits like this Storm Wee Wart with the rattles in it. We used a variety of different colors, but the Fire Tiger and chartreuse seemed to be the most effective. And also, we used Berkeley Power Worms rigged Texas style, and I'm just going to show you how to do that. Now, to start with, when you're rigging up a worm, Texas rigging a worm, slide the worm weight onto your line first, and it just slides through the line like this, and tie on, we were using today about a 3/0 worm hook. Just tie it on with an improved clinch knot, works fine. As you can see, the weight slides right down to the hook. I was using an 8-inch Berkeley Power worm today. And to put the worm on the hook, you want to run the point of the hook right down the nose of the worm, about 1/4 of an inch. Turn it all the way through and slide the worm up the hook until you hit the offset. Once you hit the offset, turn the hook around, slide the worm up tight against the eye. You'll notice the point of the hook is at the back now. Put it right, run the hook point right up the center of the worm and not quite out the other side. Now, you don't want the point sticking out, and this makes this quite weedless. Now you want to make sure the worm hangs straight. You don't want any bends in it. TJ is going to show you how to fish this presentation.
The Texas rigged worm is definitely one of the all-time classic bass presentations, and a lot of people are fairly intimidated by it, but it's actually pretty easy to fish. You just want to cast it out, and when your lure hits the water, just engage your reel, but let that sink to the bottom, and in this case here, we're letting it sink right down through the weeds. Then you just want to hop it up, and then reel down. Now as that worm is falling, that's when the bites are going to come, so you want to keep contact with it, so you don't want to let a bunch of slack line in there. So hop it up out of the weeds, reel down to it. Hop it up out of the weeds, reel down to it. And just keep doing that all the way back to the boat. And don't be afraid to do it right up until the bottom, because we've had a lot of cases today where the fish have actually bit within sight of the boat. It's a pretty snag-free presentation, although you will occasionally get hung up a little bit, and all you got to do is just pull it through and just keep on. Very rarely will the weeds actually hang up on the presentation. If you haven't tried fishing a Texas rigged worm, it's ideal for anywhere you're fishing bass, but especially out here where the cover is this heavy and any other lure got snagged up a lot once the bass got down into cover. Give the Texas rig a try. Look at all the fish jump there. They should get nervous when things fly over their head.
Well, we've noticed a lot of osprey around here, and they feed up on the bass quite often, don't they?
Oh, no kidding. I know I've fished here quite a few times, and often you'll see ospreys come down and actually pick bass and perch and sunfish right out of the water. So it seems any time a shadow goes over their heads or a lure goes flying over their heads, I'm sure the first thing they think is they're going to get eaten, and they do a quick dive to the bottom.
There's another one, TJ.
Oh, see a better one?
Now, you know, when you first look in a catalog and you see or in a tackle store and you see the hundreds and hundreds of colors for plastic baits or crankbaits that are designed for bass fishing, it can be pretty confusing. But as a general rule of thumb, when you're starting out, if you want to use the more natural, subtle colors in clear water, give you a good starter. In stained water, you maybe want to use some of the brighter colors. And there's one exception, that black and purple seem to work anytime, any place for bass.
Yeah, they really like those colors. I guess people always get hung up on color. I know when I go catch a fish somewhere and someone always asks, well, what color were you using? And that's the least important thing you can do. You know, find out what kind of action they were using, what kind of presentation they were using, what style of bait, the vibration it sends out. Once you've done all that, then start to consider color, but don't pick your color first. You know, if a blue worm isn't catching any fish, chances are a purple one won't either. But if a blue one's catching some, maybe a purple will catch more. So you can play with that a little. A good little tip also, if you're catching a bunch of fish and they shut off, put the same bait on in a different color, and often you can pick up 2 or 3 more. Biggest thing with any bait you're using though, have confidence in it, you're going to catch fish with it. Makes a big difference.
Well, we come across an area there that you can tell is going to hold more fish.
It's, oh yeah, nice one. It's really important that you, oh nice. It's really important that you have sunglasses on when you're doing this, and they should be polarized sunglasses. There's a lot of glare out here. I mean, it's really sunny out today. and it helps you see down there a lot better. And I know I've seen a lot of strikes actually happen too, which kind of makes it a little more exciting.
Well, you can see the bait fish when you're going along there too. You can see the perch and the sunfish, but there's a certain type of weeds down here. When this milfoil and coontail gets up nice and tall, that's the areas to look at. Now there's weeds all over this lake, and once you start coming across them, it all looks the same until you hit one of these patches where the weeds are nice and tall, and you know the fish are down in there. And we just stopped when we hit these spots and make a few casts there, and we've been pulling out fish every time. So having sunglasses gives you a big advantage. You can see what you're doing, and makes quite a difference.
Yeah, it sure does. I'm just going to let this one go here. He's ready to go.
I bet we can get a few more out of that before we move on.
Oh, I'm sure. Let's go give her a try.
Ooh. That was a long ways out there. Doesn't feel real big. Tangled up in the weeds here. Oh, lost him. As you can see, that fish got down in the weeds pretty good. I'm using a power worm, and they sure seem to be going after it, but the only way to get him out of there is to drop this worm right down into the pockets in the weeds. I had that fish on quite a ways out there, and he had time to get off, but he did get down in the weeds and really got tangled up.
Oh, this one did some hard screaming runs on me. These are nice fish. This is the kind of fish this area is famous for. Now, the real key to Bob and mine's success today has been, being really versatile and not sticking with one bait. Look at that. That's a big, big bass. Talked to some people earlier, and they told us what they'd been catching bass on, and we definitely started trying that, and some of it worked, but the thing is, it doesn't matter what kind of fishing you're doing. Be willing to experiment. Take the local knowledge and use it, but if it's not producing, be willing to go back to something else. I'm just going to get her back.
TJ, you've told me so much about the bass fishing out here over the past few years. I'm glad we had an opportunity to come out here. I can't believe that this fishery has been so underutilized.
Oh, isn't that the truth? I wrote an article several years ago for the Outdoor Edge about Duck Lake bass fishing, and even got a lot of letters from Creston from people saying there's no bass there. Well, I think this show probably disproved that a little bit today. Just on another note, though, bass are fairly easy to catch, and they're fairly easy to overharvest. So it's really important that you let most or all of your catch go if you want to keep enjoying this fishery.
Hey, until next time, we're gone fishing.
Gone Fishing with Bob and TJ is brought to you by Ranger Boats, still building legends one at a time. Daiwa Rods and Reels, committed to total quality. Humminbird Wide, fish wide open. And Raider Fiberglass Truck Tops, today's value leader. Other support courtesy of the following companies: